We live in an era where the invisible threads binding people into a single social fabric seem stretched to their breaking point, threatening to snap. A palpable tension hangs in the air, permeated not merely by disagreements, but by a deep, almost existential animosity. Pause for a moment. What exactly evokes in you not just disagreement, but genuine, burning revulsion when it comes to a political opponent? It's not a cold analysis of facts, nor a rational weighing of arguments. It's something far more ancient, more primal. Perhaps it's a look that strikes you as the embodiment of hypocrisy, or conversely, naivety. Perhaps it's a gesture that oozes arrogance, or on the contrary, weakness. Maybe it's a specific stance that in your mind becomes synonymous with the worst you've ever seen or heard about humanity: greed, lies, cruelty, unscrupulousness, or conversely, spinelessness, incompetence, dangerous indecision. Gaze into this image, this mental caricature you unwittingly create when trying to comprehend the others, those at the opposite pole of your worldview. They appear not just as people with different beliefs, but almost as mythological creatures embodying all the vices from which you instinctively recoil. In their words, you hear not error, but deliberate deception. In their actions, not a mistake, but malicious betrayal. This process of demonization, this polarization that transforms a complex political landscape into a battleground between absolute good and all-encompassing evil, is not merely an external social phenomenon. It is something far deeper, far more personal, rooted in the most hidden corners of our psyche. Imagine that the contemporary political landscape is not just an arena for the clash of ideas, not merely an endless stream of news and debates, but a colossal, multifaceted prism refracting the light of our inner world in such a unique way that the most deeply hidden, undesirable, repressed aspects of our own personality suddenly manifest externally, yet in a distorted, grotesque form, on the face of the one we have declared our enemy. The one who evokes the greatest repulsion in us becomes an unwitting, yet strikingly accurate mirror, reflecting not so much their true essence as our own unintegrated qualities. They transform into a living screen onto which we project everything we cannot or will not acknowledge in ourselves. Our own ambitions that seem excessive, our own drive for power that we condemn, our own indecisiveness that we despise, our own aggression that we suppress, our own naivety that we are ashamed of, our own need for control that we mask. It is in this burning aversion, this sometimes shudder-inducing revulsion, that not only the key to our own shadow, that part of us hidden from consciousness and filled with rejected qualities, but also the key to true power lies. This is the power of understanding, transformation, and ultimately liberation from the shackles of this all-consuming, paralyzing hatred. This is not a call for blind reconciliation or indifference to injustice. It is an invitation to the deepest self-analysis, to a journey into the most hidden recesses of your consciousness. For recognizing that our fiercest reactions to others are, in essence, reflections of our own unintegrated parts, is the first decisive step toward genuine self-mastery, toward the ability to influence the world not through conflict, but through awareness and inner wholeness. But why does this projection mechanism work so flawlessly, with such ruthless efficiency? Why is this mirror effect so compelling that it can split societies, families, and even our own consciousness, forcing us to see monsters where perhaps only our own unrecognized fragments are hidden. To understand this pervasive illusion, we must return to its origins, to the time when these shadows began to form and take root in the depths of our psyche. We spoke of mirrors, of phantom parts of the soul projected onto the antagonistic other. But how did these phantom limbs, these rejected fragments, become severed from your wholeness? The roots of this severance lie not in the grand narratives of geopolitics, but in the intimate theater of your developing consciousness, in the very forge of your personality. Recall, not the recent debates, not the headlines that ignite your righteous anger, but quieter, more fundamental lessons. Lessons learned not from textbooks, but from the very air you breathed in childhood, from the unspoken rules etched into the fabric of your family, your community, your earliest encounters with authority and difference. This was the invisible textbook that shaped your perception of good and evil, of what was acceptable and what was forbidden. At what point in your life did you learn that qualities so essential for healthy political dialogue, that very openness to differing opinions that allows a bridge to be built, not burned, the capacity for compromise that is the foundation of any sustainable peace, the tolerance for ambiguity that distinguishes mature thinking from dogmatic fanaticism, or perhaps healthy ambition, the right to decisiveness, to assert one's boundaries, were labeled as bad, shameful, or dangerous. When did you internalize that exhibiting these qualities meant risking the loss of love, approval, or security? Or conversely, when did suppressing them, concealing them, come to be perceived as the only path to acceptance, to survival in a system that did not value your authenticity, but demanded conformity to a certain ideal? Perhaps you were punished for curiosity, ridiculed for attempting to find common ground, or suppressed for showing initiative. These moments, seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of history, left deep imprints on the landscape of your soul. These early, often unconscious lessons became the invisible boundaries of your inner map, determining which parts of yourself you could acknowledge and which had to be banished to the hidden recesses of the shadow. Every "you mustn't," every "you should," every "that's improper" or "that's too much" was imprinted on your psyche, creating an internal censor that now in adulthood projects these same judgments onto the external world, onto those who dare to embody these rejected qualities. The one you now reject with such fury in a political opponent is often merely a mirror image of those parts of yourself that were once rejected, devalued, or conversely overly imposed and now cause repulsion. This burning aversion is not toward a real person, but toward a symbol, a trigger that activates your own unfinished inner work. It is the pain of encountering your exiled self, clothed in unfamiliar garments. It is here, at this intersection of personal history and collective madness, that the key to understanding lies. Your current attitude toward others is an echo of long-learned lessons about yourself. But this is only one side of the coin. There is also a deeper archetypal mechanism, universal to all human experience, which actively shapes this dynamic of projection. We spoke of the whispers of the past, of the unseen censor erected within us. But these mechanisms are not merely individual quirks or echoes of childhood traumas. They are universal, archetypal principles of the psyche, eternal laws of the soul that invariably manifest, demanding their recognition. That which is repressed does not disappear. It merely recedes into the shadowy corners of consciousness, accumulating invisible force like an underground spring seeking an outlet. Imagine the metaphor of exile from the tribe. Picture a character trait, a drive, a deep desire, or even a simple, innocent self-expression that was once branded as unacceptable by family, by society, by those who shaped your world. This part, like a once-loved member of the community, was expelled from the visible circle of yourself, sent into exile beyond what was permissible. It no longer has a voice. It cannot manifest freely. But the exile does not die. It merely waits beyond the campfire's light, observing, gathering energy, and striving to return, to find a loophole to be reintegrated. This is where the second metaphor comes into play, the energy of the unpaid bill. Every suppressed urge, every unexpressed emotion, every unrealized potential accumulates a psychic debt within us. This is not a static state, but a dynamic pressure, like the mounting tension in a tightly strung cord. This bill demands payment, and if it is not settled internally through awareness and integration, it will inevitably seek external projection. The world around us transforms into a screen, and other people become the unwitting carriers of our own unpaid debts. We see in them what we cannot or will not acknowledge in ourselves, thereby unconsciously transferring the burden of our shadow to them. Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray serves as a vivid artistic embodiment of this mechanism. Dorian, in his desperate pursuit of eternal youth and pleasure, makes a pact that allows him to remain externally flawless, while all his sins, all the moral decay and ugliness of his soul manifest on the portrait. The painting, this other, becomes the vessel for his hidden, unrecognized shadow. Dorian lives a life of external beauty and serenity, while the canvas, hidden from prying eyes, bears the horrific burden of his true self. And his revulsion toward the portrait is, in essence, his revulsion toward his own unrecognized shadow. He projects his decomposition onto the painting, allowing himself to remain elusively pure. And the moment he tries to destroy the portrait, he destroys himself. For this other was an integral part of his being. This universal mechanism, this alchemy of psychic projection, manifests in countless forms, often crystallizing into specific archetypal images that we unmistakably recognize and react to with particular intensity. We have already discussed how the invisible threads of psychic projection transform a political opponent into a distorted mirror, reflecting not their true face, but our own qualities banished to the shadow. This is not merely a metaphor. It is a living, pulsating mechanism that, much like an ancient oracle, points to our internal, unconscious conflicts. Now let us ask ourselves a question as sharp as it is uncomfortable. What types of people, in the context of contemporary political conflicts, evoke in you irrational hatred, contempt, or burning irritation? Not just disagreement, but that deep repulsion that makes your fists clench, your pulse quicken, and your mind sink into the mire of righteous anger. Allow me to outline a few archetypal figures that, like demons from old tales, often emerge on the horizon of our political battles, becoming ideal vessels for our shadow. First, there is the blind fanatic. His eyes are blinkered by a single idea, a single right path. He is deaf to arguments, blind to nuances, and his speech is always a sermon that brooks no objection. He doesn't listen. He pronounces. In his unwavering conviction, we see a threat to our intellectual sovereignty, to our right to doubt, to explore. He embodies that part of us that perhaps was once too dogmatic, or conversely, that part that fears such dogmatism within ourselves, fears losing mental flexibility of dissolving into collective madness. His aggressive certainty may be a reflection of our own suppressed desire to be absolutely right, never to err, or fear of our own indecisiveness. Second, the cynical manipulator. He masterfully juggles facts, twists meanings, his smile is false, and every action is dictated solely by self-interest and a thirst for power. He seems to embody betrayal, deceit, and indifference to truth. In him, we see a projection of our own fear of being deceived, exploited, and perhaps also a suppressed drive for control, for achieving goals at any cost, which we have forbidden ourselves as unethical. His unscrupulousness may mirror our own suppressed ambition or fear of the darker side of our will. And finally, the irrational accuser. This archetype constantly finds culprits. His language is one of reproach and indignation. He does not seek solutions, only to demonstrate others' guilt in an endless cycle of accusations. In him we see a hypertrophied reflection of our own unsatisfied sense of justice, unexpressed anger at the world's injustices, or fear of being accused ourselves of being imperfect. He forces us to confront our own need for flawlessness and inability to forgive. Let me offer a short story that sheds light on this mechanism. Imagine Anna, a woman who always prided herself on her empathy and ability to engage in dialogue. She believed in the power of compromise and rational discussion. But in recent years, immersed in social media, she began to notice how a certain blind fanatic named Victor, an online persona whose profile was literally saturated with dogmatic assertions and an aggressive rejection of any dissent, triggered a wave of almost physical nausea in her. Anna spent hours trying to convince Victor to prove him wrong, but each time she encountered a wall of absolute, impenetrable certainty that only ignited her righteous anger. She saw in Victor the embodiment of all the most repulsive qualities: stubbornness, intolerance, intellectual rigidity. What Anna didn't realize was that Victor, as she perceived him, was merely a canvas for her own carefully hidden shadow. In her youth, Anna, striving to be good and understanding, suppressed any hint of stubbornness, any urge for an uncompromising defense of her convictions, any trace of aggression in an argument. She learned to smooth things over, avoid conflicts, so as not to be intolerant. But this energy didn't disappear. It merely went underground. And now when Victor displayed these qualities forbidden for Anna in such a demonstrative, overt form, they evoked in her not just disagreement, but a deep, irrational fury. This was fury not at Victor, but at that part of herself she had once exiled, at that capacity to be uncompromising, to stand by her truth to the very end, even if it meant conflict. She hated in Victor her own rejected power of conviction, her inner fanatical need for truth that could have been expressed constructively, not destructively. Her contempt for his inflexibility was merely a reflection of her own fear of her suppressed rigidity, of that part capable of standing firm regardless of others' opinions. This phenomenon, where an external figure becomes the bearer of our internal prohibitions, is incredibly potent. And in every such demon, in every archetype we imbue with negative traits, lies not only our shadow, but also a potential resource, a strength we once rejected. We have already discussed how the specter of the shadow roams the corridors of modern politics, transforming opponents into grotesque caricatures, into frightening embodiments of everything we have rejected within ourselves. But what if behind every such demonic mask, something else is hidden? What if what we so fiercely condemn externally is merely a distorted reflection of a precious but unrecognized gift within ourselves? Let us look closer at these shadows that haunt us in the political landscape and try to discern their true, bright core. Behind the figure of the blind fanatic whose dogmatism and rigidity evoke irrational repulsion in us actually pulsates the strength of unwavering conviction. This is the pure, primal capacity to believe wholeheartedly in something, to dedicate oneself entirely to an ideal, to be fiercely loyal to one's principles. In his blinding passion, we see merely a hypertrophied manifestation of what was once forbidden within ourselves, the right to absolute devotion to one's dream, to uncompromising adherence to a path that seems uniquely true. And here arises a profound question. What valuable ability or right have you forbidden yourself, exiling this vice, this unwavering faith manifesting in a political opponent into the shadow? Have you denied yourself the right to deep, uncompromising faith, to unshakable loyalty to your principles, to a passion capable of moving mountains, fearing you might become such a fanatic? Behind the image of the cynical manipulator, whose calculative nature and drive for control appear to us as the embodiment of evil, lies a keen strategic intellect and the capacity for effective influence. This is the ability to see several steps ahead, understand hidden motives, build complex systems, and achieve set goals. His seeming unscrupulousness is merely a dark mirror of our own suppressed ambition, our desire to influence the world rather than merely be a passive observer. Perhaps you have denied yourself the right to be influential, strategically minded, capable of shaping reality rather than just reacting to it. Have you suppressed your own healthy ambition and desire to control your life, fearing you might be perceived as a manipulator? Finally, behind the irrational accuser, whose anger and relentless criticism seem unfounded and destructive to us, lies an insatiable thirst for justice and moral uncompromisingness. This is a deeply rooted drive for truth, for restoring balance, for ensuring everyone receives their due. His seeming hysteria is merely a distorted echo of our own suppressed capacity to feel righteous anger, to refuse to tolerate lies, to demand honesty, both from others and from ourselves. Perhaps you have suppressed your right to righteous anger in the face of injustice, to refuse to compromise with falsehoods, to a deep sense of self-worth that demands honesty from others and from yourself, solely to avoid resembling this accuser? Unraveling these projections is the key to regaining our wholeness, to integrating those parts of our personality that have been exiled. For when we deny these qualities within ourselves, we deprive ourselves not only of potential vices, but also of colossal inner strength. And this refusal, this self-denial, has its consequences. We have discussed how unintegrated parts of our psyche, suppressed in the shadow, find their reflection in the demonized images of political opponents. But what is the cost of this projection? How does this unconscious interplay of mirrors manifest in our daily lives, in our decisions, in our perception of the world, and ultimately lead to irrecoverable losses? Imagine someone who was taught in youth that any form of dogmatism or unwavering faith was a sign of limitation, if not a direct threat. Their own yearning for deep convictions was suppressed, branded as blind faith. Now, engaged in political discourse, they see anyone demonstrating strong conviction, whether a proponent of a different ideology or even their own, as merely a blind fanatic. And they are incapable of listening, incapable of grasping the logic behind another's stance, because their internal fear of resembling this demon drowns out the voice of reason. As a result, they miss opportunities for dialogue, for finding common ground, for forming coalitions that could advance their own values. Their fear paralyzes their capacity for effective political action, transforming them into a powerless observer, constantly condemning but unable to influence. This is not the opponent's failure, but their own. Or consider another example, someone who was once punished for showing ambition or a drive for control, perceiving it as cynical manipulation. They now see every politician, every public figure as merely a cunning puppeteer pulling strings. They reject every initiative, every statement, every promise, seeing only a hidden agenda. This fear of being deceived, of becoming a puppet in someone else's hands, is so powerful that they prefer complete inaction or constant suspicion. They deprive themselves of the opportunity to support genuinely positive changes because their paranoia prevents them from distinguishing sincerity from deceit. Their choice of information becomes one-sided. They seek only confirmation of their hypothesis about universal depravity, ignoring facts that could dismantle their cozy, albeit disempowering, world of total distrust. They condemn themselves to constant disappointment and political apathy, believing that they are all the same and thereby become part of the problem themselves, relinquishing their own agency. Finally, there are those who have suppressed their anger, their righteous indignation at injustice, fearing they might be labeled an irrational accuser or hysteric. They now look upon anyone who openly expresses their outrage, who demands justice, as a madman possessed by emotions. In discussions, they neglect the emotional component of arguments, attempting to reduce everything to cold logic, which, however, fails when dealing with human suffering or moral principles. Their fear of being affected by others' anger and their fear of expressing their own leads to emotional detachment and an inability to empathize. They cannot support those fighting for a just cause because their internal censor screams, "Don't be like them, don't be so emotional and biased." This alienates them from profound social processes and deprives them of a voice that could otherwise be heard. Thus, you see, your fear of resembling these demons, be it the blind fanatic, the cynical manipulator, or the irrational accuser, leads you to make decisions that are not merely disadvantageous, but frankly destructive for yourself and society. You cut yourself off from information that could broaden your understanding, from people who could become your allies, from opportunities for constructive action. You choose isolation, suspicion, or apathy simply to avoid confronting your own shadow. At this point, you might object, but they genuinely behave terribly. It's not just my projection, it's the objective reality of their actions. And you are right. Real manifestations of dogmatism, manipulation, and destructive anger do exist in the world. We are not urging you to deny objective reality or excuse others' flaws. The crux is this: how does your internal makeup your suppressed qualities influence how you perceive these external manifestations? Why do they elicit such a powerful, disempowering reaction? And how does this perception strip you of your own strength and clarity? The question is not what they do, but how you react and what that reaction says about you. For one who sees only evil externally risks failing to notice its genesis within themselves, or more insidiously, missing the opportunity to integrate those qualities hidden behind the demon's mask, transforming them into a source of their own strength. The irony of the psyche is that it not only repels what it finds repulsive, but also attracts unconsciously projecting other, no less significant aspects of our soul. We have already delved into the depths of the shadow, that part of us that is rejected and projected onto figures embodying our aversion. But the psyche is not merely a dark abyss. It also conceals shining peaks, our unrealized potentials, our dormant talents, our genuine greatness, which we sometimes fear to acknowledge within ourselves. This is what Jung called the golden shadow, a treasure trove of admirable qualities, yet for some reason exiled from our conscious self and projected onto external objects. In the maelstrom of political polarization, where seemingly only hatred and repulsion dominate, the golden shadow plays an equally insidious role. It manifests not in demonization, but in deification. We see it in the unrestrained admiration with which individuals or groups cling to their leaders, ideologues, or heroes. Whether it's a charismatic politician, an unshakable public figure, or even the image of an idle opponent whose willpower, strategic thinking, or oratorical skill we may subconsciously acknowledge. Even if we reject their methods, we surrender our strength, our capacity for action, for change, for insight to them. We project onto them our unrealized courage, our wisdom, our drive for justice, our gift of persuasion, our ability to unite or lead. In this act of projection, seemingly harmless and even inspiring, lies a deep self-sabotage. By giving our most valuable qualities to an external object, we empty ourselves. We become passive consumers of others' will, others' initiative, and others' decisions. We believe that true power, true vision, and true capacity for transformation reside out there, beyond ourselves. This creates an illusion of dependency, stripping us of our own agency and genuine responsibility for what unfolds. We wait for them to decide, them to lead, them to change the world, while the potential for this slumbers within us, yet remains untapped. Pause for a moment. Who is your idol or object of admiration in the sphere of political influence, social activism, or even as an ideal opponent whose qualities you might unwittingly respect despite disagreements? What are your own talents and unrealized abilities that you have gifted to them? Perhaps it's their unwavering conviction that you fear to express, their courage to speak truth that you suppress, their ability to unite people that you don't utilize, their strategic mind that you don't cultivate within yourself. This is not a call to cynicism or to devalue others. It is an invitation to reclaim what rightfully belongs to you. For true integrity and authentic power are born not only from integrating our dark, rejected aspects, but also from reclaiming our own radiance, our golden shadow. Only when we dare to acknowledge and embrace the full spectrum of human experience within ourselves, from the darkest depths to the brightest peaks, can we engage with the world and with others not from a position of lack or projection, but from the fullness of our own being. This is just one step on the path to genuine liberation. It is time to reclaim what has been unconsciously externalized, scattered across the landscape of political beliefs and ideological battles. This inner alchemy is the only path to true power, to the ability to see the world not through the prism of distorting projections, but in its multidimensional, complex truth. Everyone who evokes a storm of indignation in us, or conversely, blind adoration in the political arena, is merely a messenger carrying a message from our own deeply hidden self. We are not advocating for the justification of evil or the abandonment of principles, but for a profound understanding that our reaction is our own key to liberation. Mirror of polarization, a practice for shadow integration. I offer you a simple yet powerful exercise that will allow you to begin the process of reclaiming your power. 1. Identify the trigger. Choose any political figure, group, ideology, or even a specific statement that elicits particularly strong, sometimes irrational emotions in you, be it fierce rejection, deep contempt, intense outrage, or conversely, unconditional admiration, idealization, or blind faith. So 2, pinpoint specific qualities. Ask yourself, what specific qualities, character traits, or actions of this figure group provoke such a reaction in you? Be as specific as possible. It could be their hypocrisy, aggression, weakness, incompetence, narcissism, tyranny, or perhaps courage, wisdom, determination, charisma, altruism. Write down these qualities. 3. Reflecting the negative shadow. If you experience negative emotions, in what situation in your own life have you ever displayed or suppressed but deeply wished to display a similar trait? Perhaps you were once incompetent and felt ashamed of it, or aggression boiled within you that you didn't allow yourself to release, or you unconsciously wished to be just as unprincipled to achieve a goal but feared judgment. Allow yourself to acknowledge that this trait or its potential also exists within you. Not to condemn yourself, but to understand, accept, and integrate. What could this trait offer you if you could manage it instead of suppressing it? 4. Reflecting the golden shadow. If you experience admiration, where in your life have you displayed or suppressed these heroic qualities? Perhaps you possess the potential for wisdom, but have never allowed it to manifest, thinking you weren't smart enough, or you are courageous, but don't allow yourself to take risks, fearing failure. Recognize these qualities as your own, dormant within you. How can you begin to express them in your life? Not by projecting them onto external idols, but by becoming one for yourself. 5. Reclaiming power. Conclude the exercise by saying aloud or writing down, what I have seen and name group I acknowledge as a part of myself, either as manifested, as potential, or as something I have suppressed. I reclaim this energy to use it for my growth and conscious choice rather than for blind reaction. This process is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is an act of deep self-discovery that dispels the fog of illusion and restores your lost agency, transforming external enemies or saviors into teachers of your own inner world. It frees you from the shackles of reactivity, granting clarity and inner peace. For beneath the surface of our political disagreements, behind the veil of demonization and idealization, lies something far more fundamental, something that concerns the very structure of our perception of reality and the ways in which we construct our worlds, both internal and external.